So I guess we are good to go. Yeah, let me turn on the pointer. Yeah. Uh, Good evening, guys. So welcome to another live problem solving session for the course Introduction to Semiconductor Devices, which is being conducted by Professor Naresh Kumar Imani from IIT Hyderabad. Just to introduce myself again, I am Soham Lakhote, currently a fourth year PhD student at IISc Bangalore, working under Professor Gaurav Banerjee, and my area of expertise is in the field of analog and RF circuits, especially the radars which are used for non-contact vital signs monitoring. So now again the organization will be same. We will first have a session for 50-60 minutes. Then we will quickly take a 5 or 6 minutes break, and then we will resume our session. Also note that the diagrams which are not referenced in this particular slides, they have been taken from the Donald Neiman book. So in many of the diagrams you will not be able to see any reference mentioned. So just assume that those diagrams have been taken from the Donald Neiman's book. And also I hope you all are able to access the recordings as well as the lecture slides. So this is the YouTube channel where all the sessions are being uploaded, and in the description section of each video you will be able to find the link for the presentation folder where the lecture notes are being uploaded. So I hope all of you are able to access them. So without any delay, I guess let's start the today's lecture. So what we have seen in this particular week is, in the last week we had seen about MOS capacitor. We had also calculated the threshold voltage and all, right? So after that we understood that the MOSFET is nothing but a basic structure that is required to understand the functionality of the MOSFET, right? And now we didn't assume any non-idealities in the last week's lecture, which taught you about the MOS capacitor. So what are those non-idealities? So we had assumed that there is no difference in the Fermi levels of the metal as well as the semiconductor. And the next thing that we had assumed is that this oxide is perfectly pure. This oxide that you are seeing over here, this silicon dioxide, right? So it is completely pure. So these were the assumptions that we had made last time. But you know, in the real world it is not possible. There will always be existing some finite work function difference between the metal and the semiconductor, right? So now first of all we will take that non-ideality into the account, and after that we will go into the non-ideality, that is what happens when there are fixed charges that are present in the oxide. And once the concepts that are required to solve the numericals in today's lecture are covered, then we will move on to the problems. Okay, so by the way, the conceptual part for this lecture will be little bit on the higher. Just a minute, somebody wants to join. Yeah, so the conceptual part on this lecture will be little bit on the higher side, because some conceptual questions are there which needs to be cleared in this lecture itself, or else the functionality of the MOSFET you won't be able to understand properly. Okay, so first of all we will start with the work function difference. So how did we define the work function? So the work function is nothing but the difference between the vacuum and the Fermi level. So in a very clear cut and simple manner, it is the amount of energy that is required to remove an electron from the surface of the material towards the infinity. Correct? So now so according to that statement we define that the work function is nothing but difference between the Fermi level and the vacuum level, evac. Correct? So this is happening for the metal, and similarly depending on whether the semiconductor is p type or n type, again you will have to define the work function. So how will you define it over here? So from this level to the Fermi level, right? So this is the work function for this particular semiconductor. Correct? I can denote it by E phi s. Correct? So now you know that there exists a finite difference between these two work functions. So now we have to see what happens when we join these materials together. Correct? So there is oxide in between, but you know that when we join the material and when the semiconductor material is under the equilibrium, there cannot exist any variation or any slope in the Fermi level. Correct? So that's why this Fermi level is becoming constant. That is what you are seeing over here. Correct? So now what we have to do? So you know how to draw the energy band diagrams, right? So this Fermi level is present over here, this Fermi level is present over here. So if I consider this left side, correct? If I consider this left side, then I have to pull it down, and if you consider this right side, correct, then I have to pull it up so that the EF remains at a constant level. So now if I just take a constant point over here, and if I pull this right side on the upper level, correct, if I pull it on the higher side, this right side, that is the semiconductor material, then this EC will be actually shifting to some level like this. Correct? EC will be shifting to some level like this, And if I have this point which is constant over here, then you can see the band bending will occur something like this. Correct? And that is what you are exactly seeing over here. So that's how we determine the direction of the band bending. Correct? So once that is done, then you can also observe one interesting thing. There exists a finite slope in the conduction band, right? And what is this quantity? 1 upon q dc by dx. So this is nothing but our beloved electric field, correct? It is our electric field. So what does this mean? Even without applying any external voltage, I still have some electric field across the oxide, correct? So first of all, we understood what happens when there is a work function difference. We got the phenomena which is called as the band bending, correct? By default there will be a band bending in the semiconductor, correct? And the voltage that we will apply externally to cancel out this band bending, so we call it as a flat band voltage. This is what sir must have told you also, correct? Flat band voltage, correct? So this is the manifestation of having a finite work function difference, correct? Now we will move on to the next slide, and this is where this concept will help us to solve some numericals, correct? So in the first part, in the both parts, you are seeing that we have a p-type material. Why p-type? Because EF is very near to the EV over here, correct? So both the cases we have p-type materials. Now what is the question? So now what we want to do, we actually want to calculate the work function difference between the metal and semiconductor. So we have been asked to calculate phi ms, that is phi m minus phi s, correct? And note that on the left side you don't have metal anymore. You have n plus poly on the left side and p plus poly on the right side, correct? So I will do it for the left hand side. For the right hand side I will take some help from you, correct? So now what is this poly? This is nothing but a polysilicon material, correct? It's a polysilicon material. So the advantage of it we will see in the later slides, that why we have shifted from the metals to polysilicon material. But note that since this is also a silicon, this is also silicon, both of them will have the same electron affinity. Now what is the electron affinity? Electron affinity is nothing but the difference between the vacuum level and this EC, that is a conduction band. Okay, it is different from the work function. The work function was the difference of vacuum and the Fermi level. Okay, so now what I will be doing, I will first write the phi m. I will first write the phi m for this particular n plus poly case, correct? So if I assume a E vacuum level like this, if I assume a E vacuum level, correct? Then first of all what I have, first of all I have this chi Si. That is the electron affinity, right? And now this chi Si, note that the Fermi level is exactly same as conduction band. Now why did this happen? Just see the sign of n. It is n plus. This is super heavily doped material, correct? This is super heavily doped material, and you know the fact that as I increase the doping concentration of my donor impurities, the Fermi level will move towards the conduction band, correct? So if I dope it super heavily, then I can approximate that my Fermi level is exactly at the same level as the conduction band, correct? So I have a chi Si over here, correct? This is equal to my phi m, correct? Now what I have to do, I have to find the phi s also. What is the phi s? So from this vacuum level, if I go to the Fermi level like this is my phi s, correct? This is the work function for that semiconductor material. Now again note that this is chi Si, this is chi Si, correct? And now I have to add EC minus EF in this particular term, correct? So how will I do it? I am breaking it down into two terms. So first of all, I know that intrinsic Fermi level is approximately in the middle of the band gap, correct? So I have a Eg by 2 difference between the EC and the intrinsic Fermi level, and from here I know EFI minus EF is nothing but this phi FP term that we had defined. And how to calculate it? It is nothing but your KT ln of what? Na upon Ni, correct? So if I add 3 of this chi Si, Eg by 2 and E phi Fp, I will be able to get the value of phi s, correct? I will just write it over here. Phi s is what? Chi Si plus Eg by 2 plus I have phi Fp over here, Q phi Fp maybe, correct? And on the other side phi m, I just have chi Si, correct? So for this particular diagram number A, if I write phi ms, this is nothing but phi m minus phi s, correct? So chi Si minus of chi Si plus Eg by 2 plus Q phi Fp. So what this will come out to be, this chi si will get cancelled out. So you will be left with minus of Eg by 2 plus your Q times phi f. Correct? This happened for this left hand side. So this is my phi ms. And now why is it so important? Because in the questions you will be asked to calculate the flat band voltage or the work function difference. So you have to know this formula. In case if you forget this formula, then at least note the procedure which I am following. Correct? So now I will take the help from you guys to solve this part number B over here. Correct? I again want to do it methodically. So let's have a vacuum level defined on the top over here. Correct? This is evac. Now how can I define the phi m over here? So the phi m is nothing but the difference between the vacuum level and the Fermi level. So now this will be my phi m in this particular case. Correct? This will be my phi m, right? So, and for the phi s, again this phi s will be what? This phi s will be denoted like this. I hope it is clear. Now note that this is what you are seeing over here. Actually, this is EC. This is EC. Now why this is EC? Because I have changed the material, right? I have changed the material from N plus poly to P plus poly. Correct? And you know that as I increase the doping of the acceptor atoms in the semiconductor, then the Fermi level moves toward the EV. Correct? It moves towards the valence band edge. Correct? Now can anyone please tell me what is this value of phi m over here? If I look at it in terms of Eg, as well as the, what you can say, the chi. And what is the chi? This chi is nothing but this chi si. So in terms of chi si and in terms of this Eg, can anyone please tell me what will be the value of phi m? In terms of chi si and in terms of Eg, what will be the value of phi m? This should not be difficult. It is clearly visible from the diagram. Just think about it.
Is it Eg plus chi?
Yes, very good. It is Eg plus chi si. Great. And now similarly, if I look at the phi s, then I have this chi si with me. Chi si, correct? Then I have Eg by 2 and then I have E phi fp. It is very similar to what we had on the left hand side. Correct? So now the phi s exactly remains same. Phi s is what? Chi si plus Eg by 2 plus Q phi fp. Right? So if I write phi m minus phi s for this case number B, right? So it will be what? Eg plus chi si minus chi si plus Eg by 2 plus Q times phi fp. Correct? So this chi si will cancel out. Eg by so Eg minus Eg by 2 is what? Eg by 2 only. It is Eg by 2 only, and then this Q phi fp, it will have a minus sign. Correct? Minus of Q phi fp. So this is the work function difference for the case when you have a P plus polysilicon material as a gate and as the silicon, the P type silicon as a substrate. Please note down these two formulas. You will be using them extensively while solving the numericals. Correct? So I hope this is very much clear to you. And now we will move on to the next part now. So based on the way that I had told you to calculate this phi ms, right? This phi ms. So now I will ask one more question over here. Correct? So now you can see this diagram. This has been actually taken from the lecture material for the week number 8. Okay, lecture material from week number 8. Now what it is showing over here on this particular side is that if I take P plus poly material, right, and N type semiconductor. So now I will just do one thing. I will assign the P plus poly on this side over here. EC is there, EV is there, correct? EV is equal to EF in this case because it is super heavily doped. And now I have one vacuum level over here. I have n-type silicon on the left, on the right hand side, correct? So now I have VC, correct? I have EV over here. I have VC, I have EV. Then I also have, just a minute. Yeah, I have n-type silicon. So my Fermi level will be somewhere here. My Fermi level will be somewhere here. Correct? Now, one more thing that we have to note is on the y-axis we have phi ms, that is the work function difference. Correct? So let me just quickly denote the work function. This is my phi m. Correct? I will just write chi si over here, chi si, and this is what? This is your Eg. Right? Since this is EC, so I have chi si over here. This is evac. That is a vacuum level. This is EC minus EF, right? So if I denote it like EFI over here, then this is my Eg by 2. Correct? This is my Eg by 2. So now if I just try to write the phi s, correct? If I just try to write the phi s, then the phi s will be this quantity. It is this quantity. So what is the phi s? Phi s is what? Chi Si plus EC minus EF. Chi Si plus EC minus EF. Now EC minus EF I can calculate by subtracting this EF minus EFI, that is Q phi FP, from this Eg by 2. Correct? Chi Si plus Eg by 2 minus Q times phi FP. So this is phi S, and phi M we already know. So the phi M value is what? Chi Si plus Eg. Chi Si plus Eg. Now why am I doing it all over again? Because here we have n-type silicon. In the previous slide, I had taken p-type silicon as an example, correct? The moment the material type changes, you have to again do the energy band diagrams and solve it, correct? So if I just write phi ms, then it will be what? Eg minus Eg by 2 plus Q phi Fp, correct? So it will be coming out to be what? Eg by 2 plus Q times phi Fp. So this is my phi ms. And what is the formula for this phi Fp? This phi Fp is nothing but Kt ln of, it is n-type material, right? So we have Nd, not Na, Nd by Ni. So our phi ms formula, it came out to be what? Eg by 2 plus Kt ln Nd by Ni. So this is the formula that I have. Now from this equation, it is very much clear that as my Nd increases, as I increase my doping, the work function difference between both, that is this P plus polysilicon, that this is P plus poly, and my n-type Si, it will keep on going higher. So that's why you are seeing this diagram has a positive slope over here. Correct? It has a positive slope and it will keep on increasing. Correct? And this value will also be positive because this band gap cannot be negative. This band gap cannot be negative, and this log term will never be negative because this intrinsic carrier concentration is order of 10 to the power 10, and Nd that you are seeing, it is higher than 10 to the power 14. Not higher, it is greater than 10 to the power 14. Correct? So even this term won't be negative. So that's why you are seeing that it will keep on increasing, right? And it will attain only positive values. Now one more thing that we can do over here, without even writing these equations, can we do something to check whether this graph will have positive slope or negative slope? Correct? So one more thing that we can have is, we know that this phi m exists over here. This phi m exists over here. Now what happens when I increase the substrate doping? Correct? What happens when I increase the substrate doping? So this phi s that you are seeing over here, right? This phi s will decrease. Why it will decrease? Because this Fermi level that you are seeing over here, it will move up. It will move up and it will cause a decrease in the phi s. Phi m won't change at all. Phi m won't change. So phi m minus phi s is there. So if my phi s keeps on decreasing as I increase my Nd, but my phi m remains constant, correct? Then that means this graph will have a positive slope like this. Correct? I hope it is very much clear to you. So I have just taken this particular case, that is P plus poly and n-type silicon. So rest all the cases, that is this one, and this particular case, So you can take it as a homework and follow the similar process. The only thing was the explanation for this diagram, that is whether it will have positive slope, negative slope, whether this will have positive values or negative values. It was just not explained very clearly in the book or maybe in the lecture. So just follow this procedure and you will be able to easily get whether this graph will have negative slope or positive slope, and whether the values will be positive or negative. Correct? So when you derive equations like this, somewhere you will get negative sign like minus eg by 2 or minus of eg by 2 minus of this entire bracket, just like what we got for this particular equation 1. You can see that this value will always be negative. This value that you are seeing, it will always be negative whatever you do. Correct? So that's why somewhere in some of these cases you are seeing that the graph is always negative. It is always negative. Correct? So that was the reason for that case. So I hope the explanation for this particular graph is very much clear. And these are some of the important tables that you will need continuously if you try to solve unsolved or solved examples of the Donald-Niemann. So you need the work function values for silicon and different materials, as well as you need the electron affinity values. Correct? So we generally use the silicon, but if you use the gallium arsenide or germanium, then you need the electron affinity values for those materials. Correct? So again, these tables have been taken from the Donald-Niemann's book. Now coming to the very important question of, first of all, why are we using the polysilicon material? For all the previous lectures, we have seen that we were using the metal for forming the gate of the MOS capacitor. Correct? Then what happened suddenly that we started to use the polysilicon material. Correct? And answer lies in the fabrication, the way foundry fabricates these MOS structures, that is your MOS capacitor and MOSFETs, right? So in this particular left hand diagram, you are seeing how the MOSFETs are fabricated by using the two different process, right? So first process is called as non-self-aligned gate technique and another one is called as self-aligned gate technique. A brief overview of some of the fabrication techniques will be given by sir towards the end of this course. So I will just use only those particular part which are important to understand the concept. Correct? So now what happens in the conventional case, right? So what you do, first of all, you have oxides on both the sides, correct? And the way you fabricate the MOSFET is, you obviously know that in the MOSFET you have what? You have source, you have drain, then you have a gate also. This is oxide and this is the gate. Correct? So the way we conventionally fabricate was, first of all, you have a silicon substrate, so you do something called as an ion implantation. Correct? You do something called as ion implantation to create this source and drain regions over here. Correct? And then you deposit the oxide and then you insert the gate material. Correct? The problem with this approach is that once I have done this structure, correct, once I am over here, I want to deposit this kind of gate structure on top of it. So the foundry used something called as the photomasks. It used something called as the photomasks, correct? And there always exists some error in those photomasks. It cannot be true to it cannot be completely true. So there will be some uncertainty that will be present. And because of the uncertainty, what you will see that normally this gate region, right? This gate region overlaps with this source and drain region. This overlap part has been shown over here. Correct? Similarly, it will overlap on this side also. Now what happens because of this? What happens because of this? So when you will study the parasitics in the MOSFET, right, you will clearly see that this overlaps actually increase the parasitic capacitances that are present inside the MOSFET. Correct? And we want to minimize them because what we want our transistor to switch at as high frequency as possible. We want these MOSFETs to work at gigahertz frequencies. Correct? For 5G, we want them to work at 28 gigahertz. Correct? So it is absolutely essential to minimize those parasitics. Correct? This was the traditional way of MOSFET fabrication. But now if you look at the self-aligned gate technique, so what we are doing first, so before even doing the ion implantation, we are actually creating the gate. We are actually first of all creating the gate. Let whatever uncertainty in the photomask extend the length of the gate on both the sides. Correct? Since there are no source and drain regions that have been fabricated, there will not be any overlap at this particular stage. Now once your gate structure has been fabricated, then depending on the distance between these two, correct, these two, you fabricate your drain and source structures between this region. So in that particular way, it actually avoids the overlap between the source and the gate region and minimizes the parasitics in the MOSFET, which will ultimately increase the switching speed and the frequency at which this MOSFET can operate. I hope till this point it is very much clear. So now what is the problem? Why can't I use a metal over here? Note that while doing this ion implantation process, right, the temperature can reach up to greater than 880 degrees Celsius, something like 800 to 850 degrees Celsius. So this is the temperature at which this process actually happens. And do you know interesting fact? If I tell you the melting point, if I tell you the melting point of aluminium, it is somewhere close to 650 degrees Celsius. Now what will happen if I put my aluminium metal while doing this process, then this gate structure that you are seeing over here, it will be completely melted. And that will have a huge consequences the way MOSFET operates. Like the gate won't remain over there, it will just completely melt up, right? So we don't want that to happen. So interestingly, if you put the polysilicon instead of using this aluminium over here, the polysilicon can sustain the temperatures greater than 1000 degrees Celsius. Correct? So what we can see over here, if I want to use the self-aligned gate technique, which minimizes the parasitic capacitances in the MOSFET and MOSCAP and thus increases the frequency at which they can work, I have to have a material which is used to fabricate the gate, which can surpass the melting point of which can surpass the melting point of 800 to 850 degrees Celsius. Correct? And polysilicon has that capability. Correct? So this is one of the first reasons why actually we use the polysilicon material while fabricating the MOSFETs and MOSCAP structure. Correct? First of all, you can control the doping of this material, right? You have all the things with you to control the doping of this material. Correct? So you can modify the value of phi-m. You can modify the value of phi-m. Correct? And why you can modify? Because in the previous slides we have seen, just a minute, we have seen over here, correct, this EFM, that the difference between the vacuum and Fermi level. Correct? So if you change the doping, then the difference will EC and EF will be visible to you. Currently they are overlapping completely. If EF and DC are overlapping, that's why you are not able to see any difference over here. Correct? So I hope that is very much clear why the polysilicon material was favored. It was because of this process called as the self-aligned gate technique, which minimizes the parasitic capacitance in the MOSFET. Correct? So I have just given you the one reason. What I will do, I will just give you a link which you can go to and link why we are using the polysilicon material instead of metal. So this was one of the main reasons why we shifted to polysilicon. So this answer has been written by one engineer on Quora. So I have actually checked the answer and it is completely correct. It is also making a logical sense, right? So just go to this link and read the answer why polysilicon is favored compared to metal while fabricating the MOSFET. Correct? I hope till this point it is very much clear to you. If you guys have any doubts, please feel free to poke me at any point. Right? So now so after this we actually went on to the concept of flat band voltage, right? So why the flat band voltage is so important? Because you can clearly see, just a minute, yeah. So you can clearly see that even without applying any voltage, by default I have a band bending over here. Correct? I have a band bending without even applying any particular voltage. Correct? So now what I want to do, actually all the derivations that we had done in the previous lecture, that is previous week's lecture, the week number 7 lecture, they did not take into account this band bending. Correct? So to validate, so to make sure that all the formulas which I had derived in the last particular week's lecture, they remain valid, I have to make these bands flat first of all. I have to apply the gate voltage such that these bands become completely flat. Correct? Only then I can proceed ahead. Correct? I hope it is very much clear to you. Now, how will I make these bands flat? Then I will need you. Then I will need your help in this particular manner. Right? So now, can anyone please tell me this value A that is present over here and this value, this B that is present over here? All of us can see that B is smaller than A. Correct? That means what? If the difference between the EF and EV is very small at this particular point, correct? Then what happens to the doping over here? Is it higher or is it lower? This is a p-type material. Is doping at this particular point higher than the bulk or the doping is smaller over here?
It's so small.
Doping is smaller. My Fermi level is very close to the valence band edge over here. Yes, very good. Doping is higher than the bulk, right? Because EF and DV are very close to each other. Correct? So the doping is higher over here. That means I have the accumulation of holes over here. Correct? I have the accumulation of holes over here because of which this band bending is happening. Right? So now what I have to do, I have to get an electric field in this particular direction. I have to apply a gate voltage in such a manner that I get an electric field which looks something like this, and this electric field will actually push all these holes which have appeared near this interface into the bulk. Only then I will get these bands as a flat. Correct? So I have to apply a positive voltage on this side, Vg. If I apply a positive voltage, then this positive charges will be developed over here on this metal plate. Correct? Metal plate or this P plus poly. Correct? And because of these positive charges, so these holes will be repelled because of these positive charges, and some depletion region will be created over here. Now that depletion region would have been created if this band bending would not have occurred. But since there is by default accumulation of holes, we have studied three regions, right? One is called as accumulation, one is called as depletion, another is called as inversion. By default, if I don't do anything, the bands are flat. But over here, because of the work function difference, my semiconductor material, that is the MOS capacitor, is accumulating in the is operating in the accumulation mode by default, right? So I have to push these holes away. So I have to apply some positive voltage. Correct? So that this holes will be pushed away, and this EF, this band bending that you are seeing over, it will become completely flat. Correct? So after doing that, then your bands will look something like this when I have applied some voltage on the gate, that is this metal or maybe some polysilicon material. Now the reasons why we don't get the bands flat is, first of all, the work function difference. Correct? That I have explained in previous slides. There is also something called as the trapped oxide charges which causes this band bending. So we will see in the later slides. Correct? So the work function difference is already very much clear to you because we have solved some conceptual questions in the previous slides. Now what happens when some oxide charges gets trapped over here? Correct? So first of all, what is the source of getting these charges? So note that we have a silicon substrate with us. Correct? By oxidizing this silicon substrate itself, we are actually, by oxidizing itself, we are forming a layer of SiO2 on top of it. Correct? So this interface that you are seeing over here, SiSiO2, so while doing this oxidation and all, correct, and you are also doing some kind of, what you can say, ion implantation also. Correct? So some, while doing the ion implantation and all, some charges may get penetrate through the SiO2. They can penetrate through this oxide and can get fixed somewhere over here between the oxide. Correct? So these impurities, that is this oxide, they have some fixed charges. Either it can be positive, either it can be negative. Now if I consider positive charges which are getting trapped in the oxide, and if I assume that they are fixed in the nature, correct, they are fixed, they cannot move actually. Correct? Now what will happen? See, I haven't applied anything over here. Vg is equal to 0. Correct? And now you are seeing over here that these positive charges have been created. Now because of these positive charges, first of all, this material is p type, so there are abundant of holes that are present, right? There are abundant of holes that are present everywhere throughout the material. Correct? So because of these positive charges, what will happen? These holes will by default get pushed away from the semiconductor material, that is this semiconductor oxide interface. This is SiO2 and this is Si, and this is my interface. Correct? So the holes which are present near this interface, they will face a push on the right hand side, and they will be moving away towards the bulk region. Correct? As a consequence, what will happen? As a consequence, a depletion region will be formed. Without applying any bias. Correct? Without applying any bias, I am by default getting a depletion region near the silicon to silicon dioxide interface. Now, a first question to you guys: if depletion region has been formed without even applying any particular voltage, what do you think what will happen to the threshold voltage? Whether it will decrease or whether it will increase? What will happen? I will just give you a small hint. This is my accumulation region. This is my, let's say this is under what you can say, maybe a flat band condition or something. This is my depletion region, and after that somewhere here I will be getting the what you can say inversion. Correct. So this region completely that you are seeing over here, this region is my depletion region, and this region that you are seeing over here, this is my completely accumulation region. Correct. So now you can see that to reach this point which we call as a transition point between what, between the depletion and inversion. So this is the voltage where we defined our something called as the threshold voltage, right? So now after looking at this diagram, can you at least tell me, if I have reached the depletion very early, then what will happen to the threshold voltage now? Will I reach it early, or threshold voltage I have to apply even higher voltage now? Sorry. Okay, so let's start with that. So answer I got is we need to apply a higher voltage. Correct. So let's imagine the case when this oxide charges were not present, the bands were completely flat. Correct. So now to reach the threshold voltage, I have to reach Vg is equal to Vt. Correct. So note that first of all, the depletion region has to be formed. A depletion region has to be formed near the interface. Correct. And once the depletion region is formed, when you increase the voltage after that, then what will happen? Some electrons will start to appear near this interface. Correct. Whatever charge extra that I am applying over here, it will be completely balanced out by these electrons. Initially, though that charge, the positive charge, was balanced by the negative immobile acceptor atoms. Correct. But after reaching a particular voltage, I am applying whatever voltage I am applying, so corresponding to this positive charge on the metal, these electrons, the minority carriers, will appear near the semiconductor interface because of the electron hole pair generation, and they will balance out any charge. Correct. That extra charge that I will be applying. Now this happened when the depletion region was created. First of all, I had to put an effort to create the depletion region first. Correct. There was no depletion region for the case when bands were flat. Correct. There was no work function difference between the metal and semiconductors. Correct. And no oxide charges were there. So first of all, I had to put effort to what? First of all, create the depletion region from the scratch. And then I have to put some extra effort to get those electrons at SiO2 interface. Correct. Now what is happening in this case? What is happening in our particular case? Some part of this depletion region has already been created, and thanks to the positive charges which are present in the oxide. Correct. So some partial effort of the that I would have applied, if those charges were not existing, I had to apply gate voltage to completely get this depletion region from the scratch. But some part of the depletion region I'm already getting because of these positive charges that are present in the oxide. Correct. Only the remaining part, that is partial depletion region and electrons at SiO2 interface. Now this is the new effort that I have to apply. Correct. So you can see I don't have to create the depletion region from the scratch. And how to create the depletion region? So you have to apply a Vg is equal to positive when you have p-type semiconductor material as your substrate. Correct. So now the amount of positive voltage that I should have applied, if no oxide charges were present and no work function difference existed, let's say this was Vg1, and for this particular case where I just have to create partial depletion region, because some depletion region already exists, right? So let's say to create this partial depletion region, I have to apply Vg2. Correct. So now, what do you think? Which one will be higher, VG1 or VG2? I just have to create a partial depletion region for this particular case, second case. So amount of effort will be more to create this partial depletion region, or it will be more to create the entire depletion region from the scratch? Come on, this should be easy now. What is more easy, to create the depletion region from the scratch or to create the partial depletion region? Which is more easy? Correct, to create the partial depletion region, right? And so how did I get the partial depletion region? Because I had the fixed oxide charges that were present, but these oxide charges were not present for the ideal case which we had studied in the week 7 lecture. Correct, so we had to create the depletion region entirely from the scratch. And how we create the depletion region? We apply Vg is equal to positive voltage. Correct, we keep on increasing this voltage, right? We reach a particular point where this region is entirely depleted of holes. Correct, and some extra electrons start to appear in this particular region because of the minority carriers. Correct, so now if some depletion region by magic has already been created for me, correct, then to deplete this region completely, I just have to apply some partial voltage, right? Let's say this Vg1 was there, correct, for this case number 1 for the creation of depletion region from the scratch, and this Vg2 was there to create the partial depletion region only. Correct, then of course I have to put in more amount of effort to create the depletion region from the scratch, that is to remove all the holes that are present near this interface. I have to apply more voltage. But if some of the holes are already being pushed away because of this fixed oxide charges, I have to apply less voltage now to make this SiSiO2 interface depleted of any free carriers. Correct, so I just have to get a small Vg2 value to make sure that this region is completely depleted. Correct, so that's why you can see over here this threshold voltage. If you have a case of the fixed oxide positive charges, this threshold voltage will actually decrease. This threshold voltage will actually decrease. Correct, I hope it is very much clear. If you still don't get it, then just look at this diagram. To reach to this inversion, the boundary of the depletion and inversion, that is the transition point, you have to deplete the region completely first of all. Correct, and any process that will help you to create some kind of partial depletion region near this interface, it is gonna lower down the threshold voltage, and trapped oxide charges are one of those phenomena. Correct, I hope it is very much clear. So now, after that, we looked at the concept of these MOSCAP CV characteristics, right? So I will just ask you one question. Uh, why do you think over here all both these capacitance are exactly same? So this is my MOS structure, MOS, MOS. Correct. So you must have studied the CV characteristics in the lecture. Correct. So now, why do you think both this in both these regions the value of C upon Cox is 1? Why is it similar? Ignore the frequency effects as of now. Ignore the frequency effects. Just tell me why this region, why the value of C upon Cox is same for both. You can use these charge block diagrams to take the help to reach towards the answer. What is happening in this region? Can you guys please tell me? Just look at the x-axis. My Vg is negative. Correct? If my Vg is negative, then what will happen? Let's say this is p-type semiconductor material. What will happen for this MOS if I apply a negative voltage? over here, correct? What will happen near the interface? Holes will be pushed away or they will be accumulated? Holes will be accumulated. Very good. So why did this happen? Because we applied a negative voltage, so negative charges were deposited on the metal, correct? So now these negative charges, right, there are abundant holes in the semiconductor, so because of the negative charges present at the edge of this metal over here, correct, the holes will be accumulated near the SiSiO2 interface, correct? So what you are seeing now, if I apply any incremental voltage, negative voltage, correct, correspondingly an incremental negative charge will be created, and correspondingly a incremental holes will be incremental number of holes will be accumulated near the interface, correct? So what is the separation between both of them? What is this separation? This is nothing but TOX, right? The thickness of the oxide material, correct? So the distance between the two regions where the incremental charges are being deposited, right? So that's how we define the capacitance, right? C is equal to epsilon A by D. So D in this case is what? TOX. It is just TOX, correct? Now what is happening in this region? Let's ignore this region now. What is happening in this region? In this decreasing region, correct? We are actually getting the depletion region formed, right? We are actually getting the depletion region formed, and now what happens between between this particular boundary and this particular boundary, correct? The as you keep on increasing the Vg, correct, as you keep on increasing the Vg, correspondingly you will get a higher and higher depletion width over here. Why higher and higher depletion width? Because you have to satisfy the charge neutrality. You have to satisfy the charge neutrality, correct? So the only way to get more number of more number of negative charges is to push more number of holes away from the interface, correct? So you can see over here, if depletion region in the first case, let me just change the color of my pen, it is becoming messy. In color I should take maybe blue will do, yeah. So if for particular Vg value, if my depletion region was here, correct, then this depletion region will keep on moving towards the right side. That will it will keep on increasing unless and until I hit some maximum value, correct? Now what happens? Now this capacitor will look something like, I have a oxide capacitance and I have a C depletion capacitance, correct? Now what will be the equivalent capacitance? So it will be nothing but Cox times C depletion divided by Cox plus C dip. All of you know this, right, from your high school physics, correct? Now if you take the combination, right, if you keep on increasing the Vg higher, then the W depletion will keep on increasing higher, correct? The W depletion will keep on increasing higher. Now what will happen if you increase the W dip? Just use this formula, correct? If the W depletion, that is this W depletion increases, then what will happen to this C dip? It will increase or it will decrease? It will increase or decrease? No, not decrease. See, my D that you are seeing over here, this is my W depth now. As I increase the Vg, my W depth was increasing. If my W depth increases, then my C will actually decrease, right? The C, the depletion capacitance, C dip, correct? So the C dip will actually decrease now. So now if C dip decreases and oxide capacitance remains similar, then you know that the equivalent capacitance will be smaller than the smallest value, correct? Just like when you do it for the case of R1 and R2, correct? If you have two parallel resistance, the parallel combination will be what? R1 R2 upon R1 plus R2. And what do you say? R equivalent will be smaller than the smallest resistor, that is either R1 or R2. So what you can see, equivalent capacitance will be smaller than this C depletion region as it keeps on decreasing. So that's why you have a decreasing nature over here, correct? And after a certain point, what you will see that this W will reach the W max, correct? The depletion region cannot increase beyond this particular point, and after a certain point, you will start getting electrons which will accumulate near this SiSiO2 interface to satisfy the charge neutrality. Whatever extra charges you are depositing on the metal by applying the voltage, they will be satisfied by these mobile electrons that are minority carriers, correct? So now whatever extra that you are seeing over here, so now again what happened? So the extra charges that were earlierly depositing at the end of the depletion region, now they have started to deposit near the SiSiO2 interface. In the case of the accumulation region, the same thing was happening. The incremental charges were accumulating directly near the SiSiO2 interface. In the case of the depletion region, those charges were accumulating at the end and the at the edge of the depletion region in this particular region. But after hitting the VT, that is the transition point, all the charges are again being, what you can say, accumulated near the SiSiO2 interface. So now if the distance between the regions, that is the plates where the charges are being accumulated, if it has again been dropped to TOX, right, then again it will come out to be the same capacitance, because this D which were initially W depth, again it has become TOX now after hitting the boundary, that is the threshold voltage point. So that's why you are seeing that the capacitance actually went to same value with respect to what we had for the accumulation region. Correct? I hope it is very much clear. Guys, any doubts? This was very, very important. If this is not understood, then everything else will be a complete confusion and mess. Any points till this particular, any doubts till this particular point? I will talk about the source from where these electrons are coming. I will talk about it shortly. But any doubts till this particular point? Is it clear why the capacitance went to the same value as that of the accumulation region? I just need one confirmation, or else I won't be able to move ahead. Is it clear? Guys, at least respond to the question. Yeah, come on. Guys, is it clear? At least respond in the chat section, or at least unmute yourself. We have a lot of concepts to clear. We just have 1 hour remaining. If it is not clear, then let me know what doubts you have. Guys, is it clear? Why is it taking so much time to respond to a simple question? It's a binary question. Just answer it in the yes or no. Is it clear? Oh, what is happening? Am I audible? Just a minute. Just give me a minute. Guys, am I audible or not?
Yes, sir, audible.
Why it took you so much long? Like we just wasted 5 minutes over here. Yeah? Come on, please. At least please respond. See, I just request you to please at least respond to the questions. Even if you give wrong answer, it is still okay. I was just asking you whether you were able to hear me or whether the concepts were clear or not. Just a minute. Okay, so I hope it is clear. Now let's. Okay, so just a minute. Where is my? Just give me a minute. Yeah. So the CV characteristics I have already explained. Like in the accumulation case, the charges are being deposited near the SiSiO2 interface. In the depletion region, whatever incremental charges that you are getting, they are being deposited at the edge of the depletion region. So that's why you are seeing the distance, total distance has now become Tox plus this W depletion, correct? And as this total distance increases, your capacitance will keep on falling till the point you hit the W max, that is the maximum depletion width. Okay, and in the case of the inversion, again the charges are getting formed at this SiSiO2 interface only. So that's why you are seeing that in the CV characteristics. So this CV characteristics return to the same value, that is C upon Cox equal to 1, correct, for both the inversion as well as the accumulation case. So I hope that was clear. And if we just try to break the CV characteristics into different regions, so for V is equal to negative, you already know that this is the case of the accumulation region. This is the case for the accumulation region, correct? So you are getting this value of Cox, correct? And as you keep on, so once as you move from the more negative value towards the less positive value, correct? So now what will happen? So ultimately you will reach zero value, and from there you will go on to the positive territory. So that is the shift that has been shown over here, correct? So if you just take into account the work function, that is the phi ms difference that you are seeing over here. So now we have to reach one condition as well. So you know that by default there was some kind of band bending. So you have to apply some kind of negative voltage to cancel out that band bending. Why negative voltage? Because a depletion region was created. A depletion region was created, so you have to apply some negative voltage to make sure that bands were flat. And that negative voltage you can see has been written over here as VFB, that is the flat band voltage, correct? What is the value of flat band voltage, by the way? So I have already told you, it was because of the two reasons. One was the phi ms, the work function difference, and the second one was because of the trapped oxide charges. Because of the trapped oxide charges, correct? So now VFB is equal to what? So if I assume that these charges are positive, then you can write that VFB is phi ms minus QSS dash by Cox. What is this QSS dash? This QSS dash is nothing but the charge density, of the trapped charges that are present inside the oxide, correct? We will also use this formula in solving the numericals. Okay, I hope till this point it is very much clear. And now once you hit the flat band region, right, and when you apply more positive voltage, now you will start entering into the depletion region, correct? You will start entering into the depletion region. And now because of that, your W, that is the depletion width, is continuously increasing. That's why your capacitance is now decreasing continuously until and unless you hit a maximum point where the W depletion cannot increase beyond a certain particular point. And after this particular point, right, whatever charges that you have which were getting deposited at the edge of the depletion region, now they will start getting deposited at the SiSiO2 interface, correct? And that's why your capacitance will increase now because the two plates which were separated like this, right, now their distance has been brought very much closer. This is nothing but my SiSiO2 interface. Sorry. And what is this? This is my edge of the depletion region. Edge of depletion region. Correct? Since the distance has decreased now, so capacitance should naturally increase, and that's why you are seeing the increase in the capacitance. Correct? So now this happened. So I hope that is very much clear. And so we did it for the case of the p-type semiconductor material. Now if you just change the substrate material from p-type to n-type, correct? So now if you change it to n-type, then this is the basic structure for the PMOS, and the case of the p-type is nothing but basic structure of the NMOS, correct? So now you know this curve that you are seeing over here, it will be getting flipped around the y-axis. And why is this case so? Because when you apply a positive voltage, so for example, if I have a MOS structure, MOS, correct, if I apply a positive voltage over here, then naturally there are a lot of electrons that are present in this n-type material, so they will be accumulated near the interface. The electric field is set up something like this, correct? And when we call the mode as accumulation, when the majority carriers of the semiconductor material gets accumulated near the silicon dioxide interface, that mode we call as the accumulation, right? So for the positive voltage we got the accumulation for the n-type. it was opposite in the case of the p-type substrate, where we got the accumulation for negative gate voltages, right? And now when you keep on decreasing, the Vg, so to create the depletion region, I have to push away these electrons that are present over here. So I have to apply a negative voltage. To create the depletion region. And if you increase this magnitude of this negative voltage, you will reach a point of this transition, right, where the depletion region will be maximum. And after that, whatever you will do, the minority carriers, right, will be holes in this case. So they will be accumulated near silicon dioxide interface, correct? And you will again start to see the increase in the capacitance as you increase the negative magnitude of the gate voltage. Correct? I hope it is very much clear. If you guys have still any doubts, then just refer to the Donald Niemann book. And if you still have any doubts, then just come to me in the next lecture. We will look into this n-type substrate again. Okay, so I have just explained you these different regions that were present in the CV characteristics. So just go through this slide once. This has been taken from the lecture material. Okay, so now first of all, we have also seen a concept called as the frequency dependence of the CV characteristics, right? So first of all, why did this CV dependence of the frequency dependence of this characteristic came up in the picture? So first of all, we have to ask two questions to ourselves, right? So when I tell you in the inversion region that electrons are appearing from somewhere into this region, first question that you should ask me is from where, what is the source of these electrons appearing in the inversion layer, correct? So this is a p-type semiconductor material, correct? Under the case of the equilibrium, right, far away from this depletion region, I can still apply a law of mass action, correct? P is equal to N is equal to Ni square, correct? So now in the bulk, the number of electrons will be what? Ni square by P, correct? So now if P is something like 10 to the power 17, then I just have the electron concentration of something like 1000, correct? That is not at all high, correct? So getting the electrons from here, it seems very less intuitive. Those electrons may appear, but their concentration is not very high. The another reason could be that there is constantly electron hole pair generation that is happening throughout the material, correct? Now because of the depletion region, there is a established electric field in the depletion region, correct? This electric field is in such a way that the electrons will actually pushed towards the SiSiO2 interface and holes will be pushed towards the bulk, correct? So now first of all, if I want sufficient number of electrons to accumulate near this SiSiO2 interface, right, I have to wait for a certain amount of time, because electron hole pair generation, this rate is finite, correct? This rate is finite. So that means if I apply any extra charge on top of this metal plate, to get this charge balanced by the electrons over here, I have to wait for certain time, correct? I have to wait for certain time. It cannot happen instantaneously because of the slow process of this electron hole pair generation, correct? So the moment I apply the positive charge over here, immediately you won't be able to see electrons corresponding to these charges over here. You have to wait for certain period, correct? Now you know that if this capacitor, the CV capacitance that I have, the MOSFET that I have, it is of very much interest to me for the case of the AC signal as well. So this capacitance and all whatever you are seeing over here, right? So how do we even measure it? So you take this MOSFET structure, correct? And then you have some positive Vg. This is the static value which will not change, and you have some kind of AC signal. This is VAC, something like sine omega t, correct? And by changing the frequency over here, you can plot these two graph, that is for low frequency and high frequency, right? And by changing this value of Vg, you can sweep this curve across this x-axis, correct? So now first of all, you understood that the charges, the minority carriers, electrons that are present in the p-type semiconductor material, they cannot appear instantaneously over here. But if I keep on increasing this frequency, right, what I'm telling, hey, I will deposit these positive charges very quickly at frequency like maybe 1 megahertz, right? I am changing this 1 million times. Like for example, when the sinusoid, for example, this is my, let's say, value of Vg, and now I have a sinusoid like this. The peak will be what? The peak will be Vg plus Vac. Correct? So now what I'm saying, this cycle that you're seeing over here, this will repeat almost 1 million times in 1 second. Correct? So now what I expect, the electrons that are present over here, they should also appear, disappear in 1 million times in 1 second. But that just cannot happen because of the finite electron hole pair generation rate. So that's why you have two characteristics over here. One for the low frequency signals like 1 to 100 hertz, right? And another for something like high frequency, if you define, maybe something like megahertz region, like 1 megahertz or something like that. So for you can see for the high frequency case, the capacitance actually did not revert back to its original value, that is the Cox value. Correct? And this did not happen because electrons were not generated fast enough to deposit the free charges over here. And if the charges would have been deposited, then the capacitance will be corresponding to this distance of Tox only. But that is not happening. Correct? The charges are still present over here, and this, the moment I increase this distance, my capacitance will still remain at a low value. That's why you are seeing there that this CV characteristics just got flattened out. It did not revert back to its original value for the case when I'm applying a high frequency. Correct? So I hope answer to this question is clear, from where does these electrons are coming. Now the next question that should ask is, there was one statement written in the lecture material that the reaction speed of minority and majority carriers are different. So what do I mean by that? So if I, let's say, if I, let's say, operate this MOSFET in accumulation mode, then what I am doing, I am actually applying a negative voltage on this side. Correct? Let me just write for accumulation mode. Correspondingly, I should see the holes over here. Holes should get accumulated in this particular region. Now there are abundant of holes in this particular semiconductor material because it is a p-type semiconductor material. Correct? And how much time they will take to move towards this region? So the sir must have given you some value, maybe some order of 100 of picosecond. Picosecond is nothing but something like 10 to the power minus 12. Correct? There are abundant of holes that are present in this region, and their reaction time are also different. Correct? Their reaction time is just 100 picosecond. Now if I operate this in the inversion mode, that is if I apply a positive voltage, correct, for the case of inversion mode, now there are not abundant electrons that are present. The electrons are, the source of electrons is majorly from this electron hole pair generation in the depletion region. Correct? I have to do something to fasten up this electron hole pair generation process to increase the speed of this device, that is the speed with which the device can respond to the frequency that I am applying at the gate over here. Correct? So first of all, the accumulation case, it is near the interface. The majority carriers are being accumulated. They are abundant in nature. I don't have to generate them. That's why their reaction time is very, very high, right? And for the case of the, when I'm operating under the inversion, first of all, I have to produce the negative free carriers, and then they have to go towards the SiSO2 interface, right? So that's why the speed of the reaction towards what? Reaction towards change in the gate voltage, right? So the reaction, so this is the reaction that I'm talking about. The moment I apply some change on the gate, then how quickly majority and minority carriers can respond, right? Since the majority carriers are abundant in nature, they can respond very quickly. Minority carriers I have to generate. It will generate by the electron hole pair generation process. The process is slow, so that's why it takes certain amount of time to get those electrons near the interface. I hope that the concepts are very much clear to this point. Correct? So so now this slide that you are seeing over here, just take it as a homework. Just go through the lecture material, just revise the lecture, and just understand now that why the LFCV, that is the low frequency side, and high frequency CV characteristics. That means this region and this particular region, correct? Why they are overlapping in the nature? I talked to you about these regions only, right? This region and this region, I have given you the reason, and it is because of the majority and minority carriers. So now just ask yourself, what is happening in the depletion region, what is happening in the accumulation region, and why the curves for the low frequency and the high frequency are exactly overlapping for this particular region, that is maybe region number 1 and region number 2. The answer, the hint for this question is, just look at the majority carriers. Just look at the majority carriers and just ask yourself, is there any role which is played by the minority carriers in the region 1 and region 2? If minority carriers are not playing any role in the region 1 and region 2, then you got your answer, that majority carriers can react very quickly, so there should not be any differentiation in this particular region. Okay, I hope it is very much clear to you. Now a very important use of this CV characteristic is to use this CV characteristic as a diagnostic tool. Just like you have pathology labs, right? Whenever you go to a doctor and doctor recommends you do some pathological test, some CBC test, some hemoglobin and whatever else maybe, correct? So just like from those reports, the doctor gets some help, right, to diagnose you. So now I can also use this CV characteristics as a diagnostic tool. Diagnostic tool of what? To actually judge the whether my oxide has some positive or negative fixed charges that are present or not. And now why is it so important? See, just consider yourself as a engineer working in TSMC, correct? And you have been given a task to fabricate MOSFETs as ideal as possible, correct? Towards the ideal, you want to fabricate MOSFETs which will work as ideal as possible, correct? So the first thing, of course, this work function difference, the 5 ms, you cannot avoid. The thing that you want to avoid is this particular thing, correct? And if you tell the foundry guys that, hey, I cannot make the ideal MOSFET, some kind of non-ideality, that is some oxide charges will be getting trapped, then foundry will ask you a following question, correct? What will be the question? Can you quantify, can you quantify this non-ideality numerically, correct? So they will ask you, okay, you are telling me that this phenomena cannot be avoided, at least tell me how much charge is present in the oxide so that we can modify the formula accordingly, right? So now what we will do, we will look how the CV characteristics can actually be used to tell how much of the oxide charges are actually present, and from that CV characteristics we can actually include those effects in the, that non-ideal effects in the threshold formula, and all the things will be taken care into the account, correct? So now first question that we should ask is, how will this curve change if I introduce a positive fixed oxide charge, correct? Now I will just ask you one question, just look at this formula, correct? And just tell me if QSS dash is positive in this particular case. So in this is, let's say, case number 2. For the case number 1, QSS dash is 0. So when the QSS dash was 0, my VT was, let's say, VT1, and when the QSS dash is positive, let's say I got VT2 value. Now what do you think, which of this will be higher, VT2 or VT1? Which of this will be higher? VT1 value higher, very good. So you can see that if the QSS dash is positive, then this term is actually negative, and that is actually decreasing the threshold voltage, correct? And you have seen from the previous diagram, maybe this diagram, right? So this point number D that you are seeing over here, this is D. So this is my transition point, right? This is where we defined our VT, threshold voltage, correct? So similarly, this point that you are seeing, this point, this is also my VT, correct? One thing that we can observe, if there are any oxide charges that are present, the positive oxide charges that are present, they will lower down my threshold voltage. They will lower down my threshold voltage, correct? So that means what? If I have to draw this curve for the case when the oxide charges are present, my VT point will shift to over here. the curve now will look something like this. The curve will now look something like this. Correct? This is what I was telling you about the VT that you are seeing over here. The VT had shifted now. This was my VT ideal. Correct? And this is my shifted VT. Correct? So by comparing, so you will obviously know your ideal characteristics, how it should look like. Correct? Because in the ideal case, this term won't be present. So you will get what you can do, you can practically measure the CV characteristics of the MOS cap. Maybe let's say you get this characteristic. Correct? You got this particular characteristics. Now on top of this curve, you overlap the ideal characteristic. Correct? So now you overlap the ideal characteristics, that is this particular characteristics. Now you plot this threshold voltages, right? This is VT real and VT ideal. By actually subtracting the two threshold voltages, right? Correct? VT ideal minus VT real. So this difference was only accounted because of this QSS dash by Cox. You know your value of Cox, you know this difference. You can actually calculate the QSS dash value from here. I hope it is very much clear. So this is how we can use the CV characteristics as a diagnostic tool, right? Diagnostic tool in terms of what? In terms of quantifying how much oxide charge has been trapped actually. Correct? So I hope you understood you will appreciate the importance of the CV characteristics and why this is important. Correct? So now what we will do, we will actually I will just leave this questions as a homework for you guys because we don't have a lot of time left. I really want to cover some important numericals, so you can actually visit the lectures and just ask yourself like why is it happening, why the threshold voltage will go up when I increase the value of Na and all. Correct? Why these curves are shifting like this. Correct? As I am increasing the Na, right, my curves is actually shifting up, that is this inversion region. Why is this happening? So just go to the lectures, sir has explained this very clearly. Okay, so now we will move on to the some problems now. So let's start the problem. Just give me a second. Yeah, so let's start the problem number 1 first. So what has been asked? So this is regarding the flat band voltage concept. Consider a silicon NMOS capacitor with the doping of Na is equal to 10 to the power 17. Correct? Aluminum gate has been given to me and the oxide thickness has been given to me. They have given that there are no fixed charges that are present in the oxide, correct, or the oxide silicon interface. So they have given me the, what you can say, this ESI is present, then this Ni, that is the intrinsic concentration, has been given, the band gap has also been given, correct, and this dielectric constants have been given to me. So now they are asking me to calculate the flat band voltage. So now flat band voltage formula we have already seen, right? Phi ms minus QSS dash upon Cox. Correct? Cox dash. So now this QSS dash is 0. So the V flat band is thus phi ms. This is phi m minus phi s. Correct? This is phi m minus phi s. Now I will just draw a quick diagram over here. Energy band diagram. E vac. This is E vac. Correct? So now let's say I have EF of the metal. Correct? Let's say this is my oxide. Let's say this is my oxide, right? And then I have EC that is present over here, correct? Then I have EI that will be present somewhere over here. I have EV that will be present somewhere over here, correct? And because the substrate is P type, I will be having a EF which will look something like this, correct? So let me just change the color of the pen. Pointer option, ink color, maybe green will do the job. Yeah, correct? So now this is my phi s, right? What is the phi s? This is my phi s. Correct? This is my phi s. The metal work function has been given to me. See, look over here. The metal work function has been given to me. Only phi s is unknown. If I get the value of phi s, then everything will be known in the question. Correct? So the phi f will be what? First of all, this is chi si. This is chi si. Right? What is this? This is Zg by 2. Correct? This is Zg by 2. And this EI minus EF is what? This is phi FP. Correct? This is Q phi FP. So now if I calculate the phi s is what? Chi Si plus Eg by 2 plus Q phi FP. Chi Si has been given to me. Just look over here. Correct? Now what about the phi FP? phi fp I can calculate. Q phi fp is what? Kt ln of Na by Ni. Correct? So what is the value of Kt? 0.0259 into ln of Na is what? So the Na concentration has been given as 10 to the power 17. Ni has been given as 1.5 into 10 to the power 10. Correct? So if you calculate the value of phi fp, right? So if you just give me a second. So if you just calculate the value of phi fp, then this value will come something like, I don't have the exact answer, but it will be something like 0.406. So this is the value that you will be getting. Okay. So now once you got this value, the Q phi fp, my phi s will become what? My phi s will be chi si has been given to me as 4.05. Correct? 4.05. The Eg value is what? 1.12, since there is also divided by 2, and the Q phi fp value that I have calculated, that is 0.406. So this phi s value will come something to be around 5.0169. Correct? So let me write phi m is equal to 4.1. This is equation 1. This is equation 2. So from 1 and 2, the phi ms value will be what? This will be 4.1 minus 5.0169. Correct? So if you calculate this value, then your answer will be coming out to be something like minus 0.9169 volts. So this answer basically. Correct? I hope everything is clear. If you guys have any doubts, then please feel free to poke me. I will be just rushing ahead now to the next numerical, because there is really one very important numerical that I just want to take today, and I don't want to miss. I really don't want to miss it. Correct? So now they are just asking over here the part 2, calculate the oxide capacitance per unit area. This is epsilon ox by T ox. Correct? C ox dash, this is what? So now epsilon ox they have given as what? 3.9 into permittivity of free space is 8.85 into 10 to the power minus 14. What is the thickness of the oxide they have given? Just a minute. So the thickness of the oxide they have given is, I guess, 20 nanometer. So 20 into 10 to the power minus 7, because everything should be taken in centimeter. So the answer for this question will be coming around 172.57 nanofarad per centimeter square. Why per centimeter square? Because this is capacitance per unit area. Correct? So this will be the correct answer. Now they have been asking us to calculate the threshold voltage. So now if I try to write the formula for threshold voltage, so we have seen it like phi s, correct? Phi s plus root of 2q epsilon si Na times phi s, right, divided by C ox dash, plus because of the correction, because of the, what you can say, the phi ms work function difference, we will also get a term of flat band voltage over here. That has been caused because of the phi ms. Correct? Now at threshold voltage, we also put phi s is equal to 2 phi f. Correct? We also put phi s is equal to 2 phi f. So now if I just write it again, Vth will be what? 2 times phi f plus root of 2q epsilon si Na times 2 phi f divided by C ox dash plus V flat band voltage. Correct? So now first of all, let's calculate this term, right? This term. So how will I write it? So this term I am denoting at term number A. Correct? So first of all, we have to calculate it. So term number A, if I try to calculate, then it will look something like 2 into 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 into epsilon si is 11.9, permittivity of free space is 8.85 into 10 to the power minus 14. Correct? The concentration of Na has been given as 10 to the power 17. And this term 2 phi f, the phi f we have already calculated, right? So the 2 phi f, this value 2 phi f, this value will be coming out around something like 0.8139. Correct? So I will put it like 0.81, maybe 4, Now this is under the square root, okay? This is under the square root divided by Cox prime. So Cox prime in the last question I had calculated. This is 172.57 nanofarads. 172.57 nano means 10 to the power minus 9. Correct? So now this is the term that I have, and if you calculate it, this will come out to be something like 0.9597. So this is the term number A that I have. Now obvious logic is to substitute this over here and calculate the threshold voltage. Correct? So the term 25F is 0.8139. The term A value is 0.9597. The flat band voltage I have already calculated in the first question. So it is minus 0.917. Correct? So I will just write it. Minus 0.917. So the answer to this question will come out to be around 0.8567 volts. I hope it is very much clear. If you guys have any doubts, then please feel free to poke me at any point. Okay. Now we will move on to the next question now. This came in the gate to 2016. Okay. This is a very simple question, so don't get scared by looking at the diagram. So they are giving us the two figures, right? And they are showing us two different structures of the MOS caps, right? So the capacitor in the figure 1 has the insulator material X with the thickness of T1 is equal to 1 nanometer and dielectric constant of 4. It also has a material Y. So two dielectric oxide materials have been sandwiched on top of each other, and the other material has a thickness of 3 nanometer and the dielectric constant is 20. Whereas for the second case, that is the figure number 2, it only has one insulating material of thickness T equivalent, and it's the same material X. This has X and Y, right? This has X and Y. So this is X, this is Y, but here this is only material X that has been taken over here. So now what they have asked, if the capacitors are of equal value, then what will be the value of T equivalent? Correct? So this is the question that they are asking. So the obvious thing is to equate the capacitance C1 just a minute. To equate the capacitance C1 and C2 over here. Correct? So what is the value of C1, guys? So the C1 will be nothing but there will be two capacitance that will be formed over here. Correct? So these two capacitances will be in series. You must have seen in the CV characteristics, right? So you have a oxide, you have a metal, and you have a semiconductor, and you also have a depletion region which is formed in this region. Now this acts like we are taking two capacitances in series. One is Cox and one is C depletion. Correct? This is exactly the same case that is present over here. Correct? Just imagine like this is nothing but your depletion region and this is nothing but your oxide. Right? It will be exactly same case. So this will be nothing but the what you can say series combination of two capacitance. So what will be the answer? Cx into Cy divided by Cx plus Cy. Correct? Now if I want to equate the capacitors, I can also equate capacitance per unit area as well, right? So I will just write dash over here so that I don't have to take up into care area. So now what is the Cx dash? Cx dash is nothing but epsilon x divided by Tx, correct? Cy is nothing but epsilon y divided by Ty upon epsilon x by Tx plus epsilon y by Ty. Correct? So now if I just multiply Tx into Ty on both the numerator and denominator, correct? So this expressions, what it will reduce to, on the numerator I will be just left with epsilon x and epsilon y, and if I multiply Tx and Ty, then on the first term of the denominator will become epsilon x times Ty. The second term will become like epsilon y into Tx. Correct? So this is the capacitance of the first structure that I have just derived now. Correct? So now it makes sense to substitute all the values and to actually calculate this capacitance, right? So now let's try to substitute every value. So Ex I know, right? Because for both the materials, the thickness as well as their dielectric constants have been given to me. So everything in this equation number 1 is known. Correct? So now let's try to substitute it. So Ex is what? So Ex is given as, I guess, dielectric constant of 4. Correct? The other dielectric constant is given as 20. Right? So now this equation will become, so Ex is 4 into thickness of Y is 3 nanometer. Correct? And the other thing will become like 20 into 1, because the other thickness is 1 nanometer. This one. So now this C1 dash, if you calculate, now this will come out to be around 5 by 2. It will come out to be around 5 by 2. So this is equation number 2. Now we have not even touched the capacitance, this C2. Right? What is this value of C2? So this C2, since this is a material X, it is epsilon X. Now what is the thickness? Thickness is T equivalent. So this is what I have. Correct? Now what makes sense is to actually equate equation number 2 with equation number 3, because they have given in the question itself that capacitors of capacitance value of both the structures is exactly same. Correct? So I will just write it. Equating 2 and 3. So now what I will get? So epsilon Ex upon T equivalent, this value will come out to be 5 by 2. Correct? So Ex we already know, right? So what is the value of epsilon X? Epsilon X is 4. So the 4 upon T equivalent will be equal to 5 by 2. Hence T equivalent will be what? 8 by 5. Correct? So this will be around 1.6 nanometer. So this is looking like as if I just replace both the capacitors in the if I just replace both the dielectrics in the first structure with just dielectric, then it is looking like the equivalent thickness has changed to just 1.6 nanometer. Okay, I hope this question is very much clear. So if you guys have any doubts, then please feel free to poke me at any point. Okay, now we will be moving on to the most important numerical for today's lecture, and this also came in the GATE exam 2015. Right? So now let's try to see what is actually happening. In the MOS capacitor with an oxide layer thickness of 10 nanometer, the maximum depletion layer thickness is 100 nanometer. Right? So they have given the value of W dep max. It is 100 nanometer. Right? The permittivities of the semiconductor and the oxide layer, ES and EOX, they have given just as a symbol, and they have given us the ratio of ES and EOX as 3. So now they are asking us to calculate the ratio of maximum to minimum capacitance. Correct? So now I will just take some help from you guys, and please just respond quickly, okay, because we don't have a lot of time left. Correct? So now this is V, this is C. So now if I just draw characteristics, right? If I just draw characteristics which will look something like this. Correct? So now this will be what? This will be low frequency characteristics, and this will be, if I just draw it with the dash line, this will be HFCV, high frequency CV characteristics, and this will be LFCV. Correct? So now if I just ask you one question, where in the graph I am having the maximum capacitance and the minimum capacitance? I will just write some points, maybe A, maybe this is B. Correct? Let's say this is A, B, let's say this is C, let's say this is D, and let's say this is E. Correct? So if I just look at this particular region, that is only this particular region, if I look at, correct? So where in the graph I am having the maximum and minimum capacitance? Very good. The minimum, what is the value of this capacitance over here? Sorry, Cox. Very good. This is Cox, right? And this is the minimum capacitance that we have. We need to find it, correct? So this is C min and this is Cox that we have. correct? So now you know that at least at this particular point, this is the point of transition where we define the Vt, correct? And at that particular point, so for point C, what I have is I have the series combination of Cox and C depletion. I hope you agree with this, right? I have a series combination of Cox and C dep, correct? So now if I just write the equivalent expression for this will be what? Cox into C dep divided by Cox plus C dep, correct? Everywhere per unit area. Okay, and so this is for point number C, and this is where I have a minimum capacitance. Whereas for Cmax, I have this term as C oxide, correct? So now they are asking me to calculate the ratio of maximum to minimum capacitance. So now it makes sense to divide equation number 2 with equation number 1, correct? So Cmax by Cmin, it will become what? Cox dash divided by Cox dash into C depletion dash divided by Cox dash plus C depletion dash, correct? So Cox dash, this will get cancelled out and I will be left with what? Cox dash plus C depletion dash divided by C depletion dash, correct? So if I just write it over here, this Cmax upon Cmin, it became what? 1 plus Cox dash upon C depletion dash. I hope till this point it is very much clear in this question, correct? So now I have to find this ratio Cox dash and the C depletion dash. The moment I am able to do that, then my job will be done, correct? Just a minute, the battery of my laptop is very low. Yeah, it's done. So now let's try to calculate this, correct? So how can I find the ratio, guys? So what is the value of Cox dash? I will just write it in this slide itself. Let me just change the color of my pen. In color maybe red, right? So what is the value of Cox dash? So Cox dash will be nothing but epsilon ox by Tox, correct? Similarly, C depletion dash will be what? Will it be epsilon ox or it will be epsilon Si? I'm asking this question to you. In the expression of the C depletion, I will have epsilon Si or epsilon ox in the numerator. Just think about it. Where is the depletion region forming? Inside the semiconductor material or inside the oxide? Semiconductor material. So I should take epsilon Si or epsilon ox? Si, very good. Yeah. So epsilon Si divided by the width of the depletion region, right? And now they have told us to calculate the maximum to minimum capacitance. And you know that at this particular point, my W depletion has already hit the W depth max point, correct? Depletion region cannot extend beyond this particular value, correct? So this will be W dip max. So now what I will do, so these expressions that you are seeing, Cox dash and C depletion dash, so I will substitute them in this equation, correct? And now let's try to solve the question. So Cmax upon Cmin, this will be what? 1 plus, so Cox dash is epsilon ox divided by Tox upon what I have? C depletion. C depletion is what? Epsilon Si upon W depth max. So if I just write this equation, then it will become something like epsilon ox by epsilon Si, right? This will come into the numerator, the W depletion max. This will be left like W dip max upon Tox. Correct? So the expression reduced to this particular value. Now I just have to check whether these values have been given to me in the question or not. Once they have been given, my question will be solved. So the maximum depletion layer thickness of 100 nanometer is given to me, and the oxide layer thickness of 10 nanometer has also been given to me. So everything has been given in the question, even the ratio of epsilon S and epsilon ox has been given. So everything has been given in the question. So we will substitute the given values, right? Cmax upon Cmin. So now 1 plus, so epsilon ox upon epsilon s is 1 by 3. What is the W depth maximum value? 100 nanometer. What is the thickness of oxide? 10 nanometer. Right? So nanometer will get cancelled, and this will be just left as 1 plus 10 by 3. So this is 1 plus 3.3333. Correct? So the C max to C min ratio came out to be around 4.33. Right? So I hope till this point it is very much clear. Now we will come to the most important part of this today's lecture. This was the most important numerical that I wanted to cover, and that's why I was hurrying up towards the end when I was covering the concepts, right? So now why does this matter? See, there should be some practical importance of having this kind of numerical. This is not just to check your understanding, but it is, this numerical has some kind of physical significance. Okay, so now let's try to see what is the physical significance. So now this diagram has been taken from the University of California Los Angeles website, so from Professor Razavi's group. Okay, so now this is the structure of the voltage controlled oscillator. Right? So if you don't understand it, it's completely okay. What I want you to understand is this structure that you are seeing. This is your MOS capacitor. This is your MOS cap that we have been extensively studying from the past 2 weeks, right? So now what you have, actually, you have some kind of LC circuit resonance, right? This is your inductor. This is your MOS capacitor. So now the circuit is, if I just try to very roughly draw it, it will look something like LC circuit, right? And some transistors are there. So what is the reason for the transistor? So you know that these inductors and capacitors, they have some kind of finite quality factor, right? So there will be some kind of series resistance, some kind of resistance that will be present over here, correct? So now it will, so now if you try to model it, then it will look something like L, C and R kind of structure, right? LCR circuit, right? Now you know that if I just had LC, correct, the magnetic energy from the inductor will get converted into the electrical energy of the capacitor. After again one cycle, the opposite thing will happen. The electrical energy will get converted into magnetical energy, right? But for this particular case, what you are seeing over here, there is some finite resistance, right? And now when the magnetic energy wants to get converted into electrical energy, some energy will get dissipated across this resistor every cycle, right? And we have a finite energy. We have a finite energy system, correct? And there is no source. There is, you can see there is no voltage or current source that is present over here, correct? So now once the oscillations have been set up, each cycle some energy is getting dissipated across this resistor. So if I look at the steady state, what you will see is that oscillations would have been died out. So if the oscillations were like this, then because of this resistor, the oscillations will start to slow down and you won't get any oscillations, correct? So to compensate for this resistor, you have some kind of arrangement of the MOSFETs over here to compensate for this R. Okay, so I hope the importance of this transistor is clear, importance of the MOSFET is clear, and the importance of this LC circuit is clear. Now what is the significance of that Cmax upon Cmin figure that we had seen? So in the previous lecture, I had given you an example of the super heterodyne receiver, correct? So some kind of arrangement like this. If you want to receive FM stations, different stations are there, right? 97.5 megahertz FM is there, 98.3, 93.5, 104 point something, I don't remember, but all these are FM stations. And if you want to tune into any of them, you have to change the frequency of this LO. You have to change the frequency of LO, correct? So now the more and more I can change this frequency of LO, right? The more and more I can vary this LO. For example, let's say FLO is there, it can vary from F minimum to F maximum, correct? So if F max minus F min difference is huge, what does it mean? I can cover a lot of different radio I can cover a lot of FM channels over here, correct? So you know that this is the environment that you have. You will get signals from all these radio stations. Okay, so in the antenna of your car you will be getting signals from all different radio stations together. It is the job of this receiver to select to select only particular radio station and then only process that particular signal which is present around this 97.5 megahertz carrier. Correct. So now if I'm able to vary my LO frequency from a very low value to very high value, I can at least tell you that my receiver can cover entire FM band. Correct. There is a dedicated FM band from 88 megahertz to 108 megahertz if I'm not wrong. Okay, there is a dedicated FM band is there. So now this LO should have the capability to tune from these bands, right? To tune to cover this entire band. Now who will determine what will be the minimum and maximum frequency of my oscillator? Correct. So you know that F oscillation is nothing but 1 upon root LC. Correct. Now if I try to write F minimum, right, to get the minimum frequency, if I'm tuning this MOSFET, right, and you can see over here the voltage between these 2 points will decide the value of the MOSFET, that is the capacitance that I will get from this MOSFET. Correct. To get the minimum frequency I should have maximum capacitance, and to get the maximum frequency I should get a minimum capacitance. Correct. So now if I take a ratio of F max and F min, by the I will just cancel this slide because I don't want to cover this numerical, right? So if I take the ratio of F max to F min, correct, then what I will get 1 upon root LC min upon 1 upon root LC max, right? So this will be nothing but root of C max by C min. So what you can see over here, is how much is the ratio of Cmax to Cmin of your MOSFET actually determines the frequency range of your oscillator. Correct. I will just repeat that statement once again. The ratio of Cmax to Cmin of your MOS capacitor will actually determine the Fmax and Fmin of your oscillator. That is the ratio of Fmax to Fmin, or you can actually say that higher is this ratio, the higher the frequency band my oscillator can actually cover. So I hope the importance of this numerical was very much clear, why the Cmax to Cmin ratio is such an important quantity that these guys, the gate guys, made an entire numerical out of it. So it was not just for testing your intelligence to apply the formulas. So it is also some kind of insight into, you should look into some kind of circuits like this and why the MOSFET Cmax to Cmin ratio matters when you go into the circuit analysis and all. I hope this was very much clear. Any doubt in this particular question? We are done today. I don't want to cover any more numericals because we have not also taken any break. Any doubts in this particular question? Is it importance why Cmax to Cmin ratio is such an important quantity? Okay, very good. Any doubts in the entire lecture? No? Other people? Any doubts? Vinod and Aryan? No doubts? Okay, very good. So we will stop here, guys. Thanks a lot for staying here for 2 hours. Have a great weekend and have a great weekend and just enjoy it. Sorry for troubling you for 2 hours. Take care, guys. Bye bye.